Well, welcome back to Afternoon Break. In honor of Black History Month, we're continuing to highlight extraordinary people who have helped shape our community and America.
That's right. And just down Bull Street, right next to Sacred Heart Catholic Church, there stands a historical marker. It's actually been there since the 1980s, and it holds the story of a woman who is almost forgotten, if not for two friends who once didn't even know who she was. It's a story that was nearly lost to time.
Contributions from African Americans have always been overlooked.
And the story of Mother Mathilda Beasley, sadly, was no different.
Recording stuff for blacks wasn't important, to the masses at that time.
But thanks to the work of two friends, her story wouldn't be forgotten.
Had we not looked into her, no one would have ever known that the first African-American nun in the state of Georgia was from Savannah, Georgia.
Lim Campbell and Betty Simmons first heard of Mother Mathilda from their reverend here at Sacred Heart in Savannah. The details of her life, astounding.
As my parents always said, she was a God-sent person.
Perhaps even more astounding, neither of them had ever heard of her before.
Why hadn't the church talked about her? Okay, that was my first reaction.
Something the reverend had tasked them with changing, learning her story and sharing it. An eye-opening experience.
As you begin to pull out all these different papers and you begin to read it, and you were like, oh my goodness, this lady was ahead of her time.
From nearly the moment she came to Savannah, a freed slave now in her early 20s, she began to make a difference.
The part that resonated with me was how she was willing to sacrifice her life if necessary to teach blacks and free blacks to read and write. She knew the importance that in order for African Americans to achieve that, we had to be able to do those things, and she was willing to be a trailblazer and lead us to do that.
Then, after her husband died,
she decided that she would give all of her inheritance from her husband to the Catholic Church.
Shortly after, she became Georgia's first ever black nun, and she went on to open one of the nation's first ever orphanages for African American girls on the site of St. Benedict the Moor in Savannah.
Being a religious person, she knew that was the right thing to do.
During that time, earning the title Mother Mathilda.
She was a dynamic African American.
And thanks to Lim and Betty, her story was not only saved, but their work got plenty of attention, leading to the Georgia Historical Marker, a park named in her honor where her cottage now stands, the discovery of her grave in the Catholic cemetery, and multiple posthumous awards, leaving a quite literal mark on the history of Savannah, putting her story in a place that no one can miss it.
We are in the tourist district, and everyone coming by would be able to read and see and learn about Mother Mathilda Beasley.
It's now been 35 years since the marker first went in, and the story it holds is twofold, that of Mother Mathilda, and though she inspired nearly a century after she was gone.
I'm just proud. That's one of the pride and joy that I have been a part of.
Mother Beasley is an example of the wonderful contributions that African Americans contribute to our society.
Dynamic indeed. Good story.
Yeah, and it's amazing. They make the point of saying, they got this marker and it's a spot where people walk by often. And that's, I hadn't heard the story before, but my wife and I, we often walk down Bull on our weekends. And I stopped one day and read the sign. I thought, how have I not heard this before? And I'm so happy I was able to meet Lim and Betty, the keepers of this story, who helped share it. And I think that's what's really impressive. You see these important stories that could be lost, and their preservation is so important.
Yeah, I mean, you stop and smell the roses, right? I think sometimes we're in such a hurry or we get distracted by other things, but yeah, just you taking that moment can unpack that story a little bit deeper.
Yeah, and we learned so much from Mother Mathilda and her story, and so many of the other stories we've got to hear so far this month. We have so many more stories celebrating Black history that are posted on our website right now, WTOC.com. You can just look under the community tab that's right there at the top of the homepage.
And coming up, we're giving you a taste of authentic